Good evening and welcome. Welcome to That's the Law. I'm B.J. Krintzman and I'm an attorney in Newton. And we are coming to you on Zoom because we are still in what we hope is the tail end of the pandemic, but we have not been in the studio yet. But a previous producer reminded me that on February of 2021, which was just 2 months ago, That's the Law celebrated its 25th anniversary. So we've been coming to you for 25 years, and I think it's quite exciting to hear that. Tonight we have a very hot topic. Newton is abuzz with the discussion about the possibility of a gun store in Newton, and I was getting from listservs and getting all these emails and people saying things about this and signing petitions and all that. And I thought it would be helpful to have an airing of some accurate information so that people know and understand what's happening, what they can do, and what's really going on in Newton around these the issues of gun stores in Newton. So as always, we have the experts, and I'll first welcome Susan Albright. Susan, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Susan is the president of the City Council of Newton, so that's a very important player in this these scenarios that are about to unfold. Susan is a longtime activist in the Newton community. She served on the Newton School Committee for 8 years and ultimately rose through the ranks to become vice chair and then chair. She was elected a city councilor at large in 2003. And currently serves as chair of the City Council, and she's also on Newton's Zoning and Planning Committee. Some of her major interests are creating housing opportunities in Newton, the economic development of the city, and also fostering business opportunities to help offset rising residential real estate rates. So we love all the issues you're involved with, Susan. Thank you, and thank you for your many years of service to our community.
Thanks.
With us, we also have one of my favorite recidivists. We have Josh Krintzman, who has been on the show several times. And he's also sort of been my shadow talent coordinator for many years, because every time I ask him if he wants to come on the show, he says, no, but you know who you should have? And they said, let me get in touch with so-and-so. But it shows you how major this topic is that Josh Krintzman actually agreed to come on this show. And Josh spent 12 years with the Massachusetts State Senate, rising to become Deputy Senate Counsel. He then chaired Newton's Charter Commission, and he was elected a city councilor at large from Ward 4 in 2017. He was reelected and is now serving in his second term. He's here tonight because he's on Newton's Zoning and Planning Committee. So welcome, Josh. It's great to have you here. And then I found out, we were chatting a little bit before the show, that Susan Albright named Josh Krintzman. She made him, are you chair of the Program and Services Committee?
That's correct. I'm chair of the Programs and Services Committee, and she is the president of the City Council.
Right. Oh, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Josh. So anyways, welcome to you, Josh. And, you know, today we're going to start with, we're talking about the possibility of a gun store in Newton. I believe this would be the first gun store. And I'll admit that I had an immediate knee-jerk reaction to hearing this. And as I said, then all these listservs that I'm on started to talk about that. And we are living in an era of mass shootings and gun violence. And we're all, I think, highly sensitized to that issue now. So sort of begin at the beginning, and how are gun stores currently regulated in Newton? Susan, you want to talk to that?
So what I've learned over the last couple of weeks is that Newton doesn't have much of a role in the regulation of gun stores. It's just like any other shop, according to Newton's laws. The only thing that Newton can do is when the applicant applies for a federal license from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, they have to send a copy of their application to the chief law enforcement official in the city where it will be opening. And they have to sign, that person has to sign off on the security plan for the store. Other than that, our main bit of regulating where a gun shop can be has to do with zoning. And that's why we're all together to talk about that.
Right, right. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. And from what I understand, Newton isn't alone in not having direct regulation of this. I understand that only Dedham, I think, of nearby communities has some zoning at the moment concerning where gun stores can be regulated. Josh, do you know about that?
That's correct. The vast majority of communities, according to the research that both we've done and the city's law department has done and other folks in the city have done, is that the vast majority of communities in Massachusetts don't have specific zoning regulations regarding firearms businesses, but rather treat a firearms business, as you said, just like a general business would be treated, which means that there are, certain areas of a city or any municipality where it's a residential district, so a business could not be located, but they don't specifically regulate where this particular business could be located.
Okay. And Ruth Fuller's emails she sends out to everyone. And she said that, I don't even know how she was alerted to this, that somebody was applying or something was going on, but it sort of surprised me that the mayor wouldn't know that. But if it's being treated, if gun stores are treated like any businesses, I suppose that makes sense. She wouldn't necessarily be notified that a candy store wanted to open on Highland Street or something, right?
Yes, although I believe that, as the president indicated, the chief of police is required to sign off on a security plan. So for this one particular type of business, there is one particular step that they need to go through, which does involve municipal involvement.
Right. Now, the last I had heard, the person who was the proprietor who was looking to open a gun store, that store there was a stop work order that was issued because he had not pulled the proper just building permits. I guess it had nothing to do with a specific gun shop permit. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Work had begun to do a lot of things there before they pulled a permit. And any change of use requires a pull a permit as well. So there was no permit.
Okay. So
for example, I think they were redoing floors, which is, again, just a standard, work thing, but you need a permit to do that in this location, and they had failed to pull their permits. And so we were able to, or the city was able to put the business on hold and issue what's called a stop work order.
Okay. So, and where we are now is that proprietor has now filed the correct permits, is that right? And he's now begun anyway, the licensing process, is that right?
Yeah, so as of last Friday, the notice was filed and posted about our May 10th hearing. So people are put on notice that there will be a hearing on a zoning ordinance regarding the location a gun shop may operate in Newton.
Okay, so, and it sounds like where we are now is what we're talking about is taking really a broader look at this whole issue, not just this particular store, but how to regulate a gun store in Newton, not to prevent a gun store in Newton. Is that right?
Yes and no. A question certainly that people had was whether zoning could actually prohibit this use. There are certain zoning authorities that a municipality has. The city of Newton can prohibit potentially a certain use from, the city could say, this isn't a use that we need in this city. We have no interest in this. However, what many of us have come to learn through researching this topic a little bit more closely is that a prohibition on this type of use in the city of Newton would very likely run afoul of the Second Amendment to the US Constitution. And therefore, an all-out prohibition is not really on the table as far as the Newton zoning options are concerned. But what is on the table is the ability to say there are only certain places in the city where it could be. And I will very quickly just say that it's been a little troubling because when you regulate zoning and when you authorize a use, you sort of implicitly say that this is an acceptable use in a certain part of the city. And there are many of us who I think feel that this is not an acceptable use anywhere in the city, but we sort of lack the authority to be able to demonstrate that through our zoning.
I'm wondering why the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. It's not the right to sell arms. right?
No, that's right. But the court cases, unfortunately, interpreting that right to bear arms have also, I guess, expanded is the right word to say that individuals have a right to be able to acquire those guns. And so it's not explicitly the right of a gun seller to be able to sell, but the right of the people to be able to acquire those guns in a certain jurisdiction.
Right. So it would have the effect of stifling somebody's right to bear arms. There are analogies in, with discrimination. You can sort of putting in certain laws that aren't necessarily targeting a certain population, but they have that effect because of how they are.
Right, I mean, without even analogizing, I mean, I think the seminal sort of U.S. Supreme Court case that touched this whole thing off was the District of Columbia v. Heller, a case from, I think, 2008 that many people know about. And that was a case that found that an all-out gun prohibition in D.C. violated the right to bear arms. And that's why the D.C. statute was struck down. And there have been similar cases. For example, in the city of Chicago, there was a court case that struck down something that was very close to a ban in the city on Second Amendment grounds.
All right. So what's the legislative process that takes place to amend zoning laws?
So we start with a draft ordinance, which the planning department has, well, you start with the docket item. And in the docket item, it proposes 4 of the zones of Newton where to start off as an opening salvo, so to speak, of where gun shops might be. That gets followed up by an actual draft ordinance, which has much more detail in it. And I just wanted to say in answer to an earlier question that we have something similar in Newton already. Years ago, the city of Newton restricted the use of adult entertainment of all kind. And so we're just adding one more thing to the restricted uses section of our zoning code. So after the draft ordinance gets written, the Zoning and Planning Committee reviews that draft ordinance, makes changes to it. And that could take place over a period of years, months, or weeks, depending on how hard it is to get the work done. There's a required, for any zoning change, is a required public hearing. And that's what's happening on May 10th. And then changes may be made after the public hearing, and then it passes and goes into effect. That's the process.
I just wanted to sort of maybe clarify a little bit about the way zoning works. And Madam President, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what happens is the city of Newton creates zones, categories of zones, like a business use 1, a business use 2, a business use 3, a mixed use 1, 2, 3, a residential use 1, 2, 3, and then it applies that designation to particular parcels of land. Okay, so a piece of land in the city is zoned with a particular designation. What we're talking about now is which of those particular designations would be an appropriate place for a gun shop to fit into the designations that have been developed previously.
All right, and Susan, you mentioned that there will be a public hearing, and I'm going to repeat this several times throughout our conversation, because that is May 10th, and that will be available on Zoom.
Yes.
So someone who wants to virtually attend the public meeting may do so. And we'll give a description of how. I'll do it a couple of times, but basically you have to go to newtonma.gov, find City Council, go into City Council, find the Zoning and Planning Committee agenda, and then when you see it, this May 10th public hearing, you'll be able to click on the Zoom link.
There's one step you skipped, and I'm sorry it's so complicated. Once you go to the City Council, you have to find the words Friday packet. It's at the very top of the list. That's where all the information is for the week's meetings.
Oh, all right, Friday packet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Zoning and Planning Committee agenda.
Okay. Believe me, I trust Newton. If people want to find this, they will find it. I'm sure emails will circulate about how to find it. And then does
I'm sorry, but I should just say that it's at 7 p.m. The meeting is at 7 p.m. on May 10th.
Okay.
Small
Great.
correction. I think the meeting is being moved up to 6:30. I think we just got word that everyone could come at 6:30. So check the agenda, whether it's, you
Okay.
don't want to miss it.
Okay. And then we were talking about the legislative procedure. So after the public hearing, you may amend it, you may not amend it. And then what, it goes to the city council for a full vote by the city
Right.
council to
Right.
approve?
Yeah.
It goes out of committee into city council. Is that right?
Yeah, the city council committees, all they do is recommend to the full council. So we would make a recommendation to the full council. The full council then votes on it, hopefully the following Monday, whatever following Monday it is from the date it's approved in committee. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that zoning is an effective way to regulate gun sales? And what I'm thinking about was, I have trouble with whether it makes a difference if there's a gun store 100 yards from a school, 500 yards from a school, from a religious institution, from parks, from liquor stores, So sort of, I don't know, are these parts of the considerations that go into it?
Yeah, I'll just, Josh can carry on, but there are, built into the draft ordinance, there are several kinds of uses that we want to buffer gun shops to. So schools is an obvious one. Residences is an obvious one. And there were several others in the draft, and there were several others proposed at our meeting last Monday night. Maybe Josh, you want to talk about some of them?
Yeah, I think you're right. I also want to say that I don't know if it's the most effective tool. I think it's the only tool we have. And what it can be effective at is limiting the placement of certain shops. Again, I'm troubled by the fact that it implicitly says there's a good place when there isn't a good place. It can be effective if you don't want, for example, kids walking to and from school to have to walk by this particular use. I fear that the analysis gets a little bit conflated with where we think would be a good place to have a shooting, right? Because we think, well, we don't want that in parks and schools anywhere, right? There's no good place for it. And it's not the case that because a gun shop is there, that means you have a little radius of 50 yards around the shop, which is where people are going to be shooting guns. I mean, the concern I think everyone shares is that bringing more of this product into the city makes it more likely that anywhere in the city, a gun could be fired. So it's certainly not going to be an effective tool at reducing shootings in the city, but it may be effective at significantly limiting the number of spaces available for this particular use. And you can do that through, as Susan said, creating a zone around any particular use, like a school. You can knock out, maybe 500 or 1,000 yards around a school. You can, I believe we can say that if a gun shop goes in somewhere within a certain radius around that, another one couldn't open. For example, we did that with marijuana shops so that you don't create a zone of the city where all of a sudden it's sort of, vice city, and when you just have a row of gun shops and other uses that are less desirable.
Right. And I was going to say, and the city didn't go to pot once we opened a marijuana shop, but I wouldn't say that because that would be a bad pun. So I'm not going to say that. Okay. How many? I don't even know where our marijuana stores are, or how many do we have?
There's only one open, and that's the same one that's been open for 2 years, Garden Remedies. It's in my ward on Washington Street. There's 2 more that are close to opening.
Oh, okay.
One's in Washington Street in West Newton, and one's on Elliott Street in Upper Falls? Or Newton
It is
Highland?
Upper Falls, yeah. And sure, you don't know where it is. That's okay. No judgment here.
All right, let's segue a little bit from gun sales to gun use, which is, I think the law in Massachusetts is you can't conceal a weapon or you need a special permit to carry a gun. I mean, what's the deal with all that?
There are some very strict laws in Massachusetts about gun sales, gun ownership. Assault rifles are prohibited from being sold in Massachusetts. This is becoming a little bit of a debate at the state level because, in a strange way, many assault rifles are manufactured in Massachusetts at the Smith & Wesson plant in Western Massachusetts, but they're not allowed to be sold here. And so there's currently a debate going on at the state level about whether they want to prohibit the manufacture and export of those weapons. Because like I said, anything that opens in Newton is still going to have to comply with the state law. And that means that they can't sell guns that have been outlawed here. I think assault weapons, I think anything with a ammunition clip of like more than 10 rounds or something like that. So there are some state laws and regulations that will certainly have to be adhered to anywhere in the Garden City.
What are the regulations concerning getting a permit to carry a gun? I think there are people who carry guns in Massachusetts. And do you need a reason to be carrying it, or do you just have to not have a reason not to be carrying it? You know what I mean? Like a felon or something like that. I don't know.
I don't want to alarm you, but if the research I've seen is correct, I think there's at least 1,500 individuals in Newton who have a license to carry a firearm.
More. I think it's closer to 2,000.
Or closer to 2,000. So
they get a permit from the local police department. They have a whole process for getting a permit to carry a gun, and there's a whole set of rules about how guns should be stored in your house. So
correct,
yeah.
and that is not regulated at the municipal level. There are state regulations about who may not acquire a license to carry an LTC. I believe they abbreviate it.
Is it both a may and a may not? Because I'm wondering whether the presumption is that you can have a special permit unless you're a convicted felon, or unless you killed 13 people Thursday, or that kind of thing, or is it that you have to show why you need a gun?
I am certainly not an expert on this, but my recollection of sort of cursory looking into this was that because of the Second Amendment, it's actually that you have to find a reason to exclude someone rather than a necessary I need one for self-defense or something along those lines.
But the police do have discretionary powers in that regard, the local police. So if they find something that bothers them in a very important way, they have discretionary powers there.
Okay. Well, I do want to ask you how people can get involved. And we've already talked about that there will be a public hearing. So I want to mention that again. Let's see if I get it right this time. Pop quiz. You go to newtonma.gov.
Then City Council. Then go to Friday Packet. And in the Friday Packet, you should see the zoning and planning agenda, in which we'll have the link to the Zoom meeting. And it'll be the zoning and planning agenda for May 10th, which I believe the president's correct, starts at 6:30.
Okay.
And then that's a public hearing where anyone can testify. And normally there's no sign up in advance. It's more of a show up and raise your electronic hand. And then the chair of the committee calls on you. People are usually given, about 2 minutes each to speak.
So do you have to have signed up ahead of time and say, I want to be heard at this meeting, or they just call on you?
Show up. Yeah, just show up. We'll listen to anybody that wants to speak that night.
Other ways that people can make their opinions known?
Okay, so we've received at least over 250 emails, probably more. So City Council at newtonma.gov is an email address that goes to every city councilor and the clerk's office. So people are taking advantage of that email address. And so when we read all of those emails.
How does over 200 compare to other issues? Like the Charter Commission, Josh, was it, I'm curious whether this is an even hotter button issue.
The Charter Commission was certainly a hot issue, and I think we did receive emails from both people who were following that debate as well. That's a joke. There we go. Both people who were following the charter.
Oh, both. I thought you were going to.
No, I was just making a joke. The folks at home are laughing. You can't hear them, but they are. There's a lot of interest in this. We've received a lot of emails. And what's actually kind of nice, I think, is that people are writing very personal emails. It's not just a form letter that people have all, copied and pasted, or we're not getting, 100 versions of the exact same email. I think a lot of people in Newton, unfortunately, have very personal experience with guns. I say that because the overwhelming majority, 99.5% of the emails that I've gotten at least have been in opposition to a gun shop opening and in favor of very restrictive zoning. So I think largely it's because a lot of these people have had a very negative personal experience with a gun in some capacity. And so we're getting these emails that are, like I said, very individualized, very unique, very personal, and very moving.
I've spoken to a few people and received a few emails from people who want the gun shop.
That
So-
was going to be my next question is
Yeah.
what are the proponents of gun shops in Newton about? Is this a civil rights issue or what are the?
So
what-
the day I went over to look, this was back in the very beginning of all of this, to look in the window just to see what was going on in this, what I thought was a vacant store. And a man was walking by at the same time and said, "Oh, is there a gun shop coming to Newton? That's really cool." So I had to explain to him that he was in a bit of a minority in that regard, but he said he had a license for a gun and he uses it for his work, and he was excited that there was a gun shop.
Yeah, and as I said, there are plenty of folks who have a license to carry in the city. There's, I don't mean to imply that there isn't any support for it, because as I said, I have gotten a few, but I just think this issue has motivated people who wouldn't normally contact us. And as is the case with many political issues, it's people who are angry, who we hear from.
Right.
It's people who are angry that it might open.
Right. And I'm wondering if, and what I had seen on listserv, one of the emails said, if I don't have a gun, only bad guys have guns. This is one of the, I'm sure you've heard that. I don't know if there are other arguments you're hearing in favor of the gun store.
The one I got yesterday, the phone call was all about, hey, they can go to Waltham, they can go to Dedham, they can go all these nearby cities. Why shouldn't we have it here and make the money out of it? That was that person's argument.
So there's a variety of, but what you're hearing, and we're going to have to wrap up, but what you're hearing is that a heavy majority is, at least that you've heard from so far, are in favor of strict zoning to try to control gun sales in Newton. Is that right?
Right. 98%, I would say, 99%.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's correct. I would agree.
We'll see what happens. I want to thank you both for your years and years and years of public service and your commitment and you taking on this this issue right now. Really appreciate all that you do for our city and all that you care about us and trying to protect us. So I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a really good show. We'll see what happens. May 10th, again at 6:30 is the public hearing, and we'll know more shortly after that, probably, of where we're going with this. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time on That's the Law. Good night.